Over the last month, we have listened as James has been telling his readers about some of the responsibilities they share if they call themselves followers of Christ, if they profess Jesus as Lord. Like Paul, James does not pull any punches. He calls it the way he sees it. Earlier this month we listened as James gave us an idea of the first responsibility we bear. One, to see each other as God sees us. We are to look beyond the outward facade and see the Spirit within us. It is the only way that we are able to look and know one another as we truly are. And it is the only way to break down walls that come between us and building relationships and strengthening those relationships with those around us. Next, James tells us how we can tell what we see, if it's real or if it's fake. If our actions match our words, and these actions are in accordance with God's desire for us to be in relationship with one another, then what we hear and what we see are true and righteous. If they are not, if they do not match, then we are reminded that words, just like outward appearances, can also deceive. And in doing so, lead us to false and unrighteous choices, some of which can have devastating consequences. Because we are human, and because the lens we see life through is clouded by sin, James goes on to tell us that even what we believe we see is not always really there. Like a mirage. Sometimes we see things in people or situations or even ourselves that we want to see because they give us hope and they make us feel better about who we are. And to overcome this, James says, we need to seek the Spirit within one another using wisdom from above, not wisdom of the world. This is hard because we are human. And because we are, our spirit, although it is perfect, our understanding of the Spirit within us is based on wisdom that is flawed. Flawed by our desire to see ourselves and one another not as we are, but as we imagine one another and ourselves to be. That's why we struggle to see how the life the Spirit guides us to live is possible. How we might be in relationship with someone who is so different than us, or how we have so many disagreements with. It's also how we find it hard to understand how God might use us to make a difference in the lives of those around us. This past week, I was asked how a letter written 2,000 years ago to a community that no longer exists, how could this letter still have relevance to us today? That question is not as uncommon as one might think. I'm sure that each of us has asked that question about something we have read in Scripture at least once. I know I have. Yet I'm also reminded that times are different now. We're more educated than they were. We don't have to rely on a wandering soul to come by and tell us what we need to hear. If we have questions, if we have uncertainty, we'll go find the answers ourselves. It's hard to wrestle and argue against such a reality. The only answer I can offer is we're still human. And because we are, we struggle with the things humans struggle with, whether they are in our past, our present, or our future. James understood this even in his time. That is why his recommendations are as timeless as the problems early Christian communities encountered. He says that the answer to all their struggles begins in the same way, by recognizing they are not individuals on their own personal journey. For James, we may be individuals, but we are all on the same journey. And therefore we share responsibility to and for one another along the way. In other words, if we see someone fall, we help them up. We don't keep walking. If we see someone's burden is too heavy, we don't wish them luck. We help them carry it. If we see someone who does not know hope, we show them where they can find it. James knew then what we know today, and he did this without the internet. We are all interconnected. We are interconnected because the same Spirit that dwells in Jesus dwells in us. Both the rich and the poor, the wise and the fool, the good and the bad. We are all connected whether we want to be or not. This doesn't mean we must give someone whatever they ask of us. But it does mean that we give of ourselves in a way that gives them what they need. And neither James nor I mean just food or rent or clothing, but hope. Hope found in the awareness of God's love in their life. The reason James's letter is still relevant to us today is that people are still, as Waylon Jennings reminds us, looking for love in all the wrong places. And as James reminds us, in all the wrong ways. It's not about our possessions, our persona, not even how smart we are. James says that the only way and the only place we can find true love is not within ourselves, but when we look to God. In today's reading, James tells us that the one surefire way to God for us and for all those who need to feel God's presence in our lives, know that God is with us, is through prayer. And for James, prayer is not about a way to tell God all the things God needs to fix in our lives. It is about coming into the presence of God. It is about feeling the transforming power of God in our lives and feeling the gentleness and support of God's love. It is in this closeness, this intimacy, we find some of the answers we are seeking. And we are able to put down some of the baggage we've been carrying that keeps us apart from God, that keeps us apart from one another. Over the last month, we have only scratched the surface of what James is trying to tell us. If we take anything away from the readings we have heard, let it be that from the very beginning, we were not created to be alone. We were created to be in relationship with both God and with one another. And being in relationship is a two-way street. There is give and take on both sides. And we must strive to find that right balance between the two. Will we ever get it completely right in this life? James knew it back then. No. But he says that as long as we are working at building and strengthening the relationships we have with one another, we will naturally be drawn closer to God. And the closer we are drawn to God, the closer we are drawn to one another. How do we help others see this in their lives? Not through force, at least not a force we control. According to James, we do so through the force, the power of prayer. And I might add, by letting the light within us shine forth. Not so brightly that it blinds those who see it, who then turn away, nor so dimly that it's barely seen. You see, even here we need to find the right balance. How will we know if we have found that balance? We will see a change in the lives of others. And if the balance is right and we are blessed, we will also see a change in our lives too. Amen.